everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back. Our guest today is Nicholas Tartaglia. Nick is the founder of the former New Gen Mindset podcast, focused on wealth and sovereignty. He is a macro analyst and behavioral economist. One of his books is called The Intelligent Millennial. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hey, pleasure to be on.
Yeah, it's a huge pleasure having you come down. I wanted to get you down and talk about, everything that's happening in the economy, gold and silver. But first, let's start off with the gold and silver. Where do you
Yeah.
think the precious metals are starting or going in 2025?
So first thing, an interesting data kind of came out in January where we saw that the dollar share of global reserve hit a 30-year low. And that was as January 2025. So clearly you're seeing this distinguishment between the reserve status of the dollar versus the utility function. And you're clearly seeing from status that the dollar is indeed no longer king. From a utility standpoint, it still holds that position. But the long-term framework of the dollar is really important to kind of look at where it holds within the central banking system. And clearly you're seeing that dynamic shift. And gold is clearly being that substitute for that thing. I don't think you're going to see a downward demand for gold because the Eastern central banks are clearly buying. And with all this tariff war, it's just creating a lot more uncertainty for the world. So I think the gold still has plenty of space to keep moving the way it should.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there, Nick. Now, what about silver? What are your thoughts on silver? Do you stack any silver? Are you an investor?
So I'm a stacker, 100%.
Nice.
I gold, silver definitely more now that gold has ran. Silver hasn't really moved overall too much. So I'm definitely, as long as it stays within the below the all-time highs of silver where it hit $50 USD, we're still not there yet. So until it hits that point, I'm still a stacker for sure. Um, it's definitely interesting to see the dynamic of that market, and I definitely like silver mining stocks because you get definitely a huge alpha return on the torque of that position. So I'm definitely a silver guy, and as well as a stacker.
Now, you said you're a macro analyst and you're behavioral economist. So what is that exactly? What are you looking at? What's concerning you in the markets right now?
So the framework I kind of took was I'm by default I kind of went down a rabbit hole studying Austrian economics. So that's when I kind of came to realize that behavioral economics or understanding the behavioral component of markets is the most objective way to kind of understand the current dynamics of the market and how to kind of look forward. And the way I did that is in my global macro report that I write, what I do is I basically fundamentally break the global environment or trends into three primary pillars: politics, culture, and economics. So the way I see it is that to truly understand human behavior and the marketplace of human activity, those three frameworks of having when you're observing human nature and the human activity within the marketplace gives you an overwhelming macro framework of what's fundamentally happening because you get to touch every single ecosystem and every framework that exists around the world.
Right.
And the idea is just to kind of observe trends, observe where things are moving, and kind of highlight them. And what's definitely kind of troubling me now is what's going on in Europe with Russia and Ukraine. That's definitely an interesting dynamic we're observing because now it's shifting a lot of the moves to the EU and NATO to kind of see what's happening now with the European globalists and the European institutions while America is splitting away. And this falls within the theme that we're going to be writing in the In Gold We Trust report, which is kind of the theme of de-Westernization. So it's not just a matter of de-dollarizing away from the US dollar. It's also the fact that the world just wants to move away from Western influence. And you're seeing it while the Eastern blocs are collaborating. What's happening in the West? They're fighting. They're imposing tariffs on each other. They're threatening each other. So the Western blocs are not what it was, and the Eastern blocs are taking advantage, actually collaborating and growing. And that's kind of what I'm worried about, really, is in this global trend.
If you're a gold owner, you already know about all the ways precious metals can hedge yourself against financial instability. Monetary metals is revolutionizing how people can invest in gold and silver. Right now, there's opportunities for you to earn 4% interest on your gold paid in gold in their marketplace. Now is the time to secure your wealth in an asset that the government can't inflate away. Join thousands of investors earning interest in physical gold and silver every single month with monetary metals. Grow your gold over time so that you're not just preserving, but growing your wealth in an asset that can't get inflated away by just printing more money. Visit the link in the description below to get started now. Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's so much concerning things happening in the markets right now, even geopolitically, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening all across the markets. Going back to gold and silver, a lot of people online have been talking about is the gold actually is really in Fort Knox? What's happening at LBMA? What are your thoughts on what's happening at Fort Knox? Do you believe the gold is there? What are the repercussions if it's leased out?
So what would be funny, so this is a conversation I was having with somebody. It would be funny if we call this the Nixon 2.0 moment, where we decide to audit, legitimately go in with cameras, show what actually is in there. But then we come to realize it's not actually what we've been saying it is. After all, how many departments in the United States keep failing audits? Clearly, there's a trend of not actually reporting what you should and losing track of real data. So what would be really interesting would be to seek a sort of Nixon 2.0 where the rest of the world who may potentially have gold reserves there kind of do what France did back in the early 70s and start proclaiming, saying, I would like to have my gold back. You
Right.
start seeing some other countries. India did it with England recently in a couple of years. So this trend could definitely expand and become an issue. And if that begins, I think there's a whole other issue coming down with the US dollar and truly fundamentally believing in anything almost that the United States says.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Nick. Now, talk a little bit about why you wrote your book, The Intelligent Millennial. What is it about? Got you motivated to write it? Well, yeah, what's the whole reason?
So, beginning of COVID, living in Canada, we kind of had a severe, mandate lockdown. So at the beginning of COVID, I decided to write a book because I decided to kind of make use of my intellectual capabilities since I didn't have much else to do. Lockdown, you couldn't do much. So I figured I'd kind of focus on my intellect and learn a lot. So I decided to write my first book called The Intelligent Millennial, kind of a play on The Intelligent Investor from Benjamin Graham. And the idea was to kind of start reflecting on the world and kind of problems arising between different generations. And that led me to write my second book during COVID as well, which is Millennial Economics, which is basically how do I structure the game of life that we play from a pure behavioral economic lens. So I kind of figured how would I go about explaining the conditions of economic to someone who want to understand fundamentally how to operate, kind of, and it derives from Stoicism, classical liberalism, Austrian economics, and it kind of continues that framework of thinking. Um, I kind of think that it's important for the new generations to continue the work of those before us, or else these type of schools, especially Austrian economics and libertarianism, without this, political philosophy, what dominates the culture today and the political system, if we don't have these opposing forces, we can be lost to centralization and globalization.
Yeah, absolutely. The world is so uncertain right now, especially with there's just so much craziness going on, especially, yeah, what are your thoughts on the tariffs? I want to get your thoughts on the tariffs
Yeah.
as well. Do you think it's a good thing, bad thing? Because I'm up here in Canada, a lot of Canadians, I guess, a lot of them like Trump, but they don't like the tariffs. A lot of them don't like Trump and they don't like tariffs. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So the first thing I like to say is kind of the expression. Milton Friedman had a beautiful kind of tale to explain his position on tariffs. Was imagine yourself you're in a boat in the middle of the ocean, and the person inside of the boat with you decides to shoot a hole in the boat, and then you decide as a consequence to teach him a lesson. You decide to shoot another hole in the boat. You kind of shot yourself in a position trying to teach the other person a lesson. And I think that's the kind of the dilemma we're in with Canada, where economically speaking, over 75% of all our exports go to the United States, which reflects about 13 to 50% of their imports. Fundamentally speaking, Canada is entirely more dependent on the United States.
Absolutely.
Um, and the other thing interesting is here we have Canada all of a sudden become this nationalist, proud people that want to fight their neighbor. I don't think that insulting Americans and playing this game with our closest ally is the solution. I think that if we had an actual leader and a country that actually respected their neighbor, that we would not be in this position. I think it's a cultural problem and a leadership problem fundamentally. And the other interesting thing is yeah, America might be putting tariffs on imports from Canada, but you are clearly seeing kind of like when there's chaos in the markets, everybody moves back towards the dollar, and you're seeing manufacturers show that they want to invest a ton of money, millions and billions of dollars into the American economy, because if you're going to have this kind of defracturing of the world, what's the only one economy that you could fundamentally believe they may have more of a better outlook, it's obviously the American economy. You're not going to move to
Yeah.
Mexico. You're not going to move to Canada. You're not going to move to Europe where they're falling apart. USA is still the best position to be in when you're a business. So you're still seeing the trend of companies move there. And at the end of the day, if Trump decides to kind of remove a lot or lower taxes and bureaucracy from the American economy, even if they have a 25% tariff from Canada, fundamentally it balances out. Plus, they have a really strong dollar. So that kind of helps release a lot of the tension because they still have a strong demand. So they can still import a lot of goods from a weaker economy.
Hello, my fellow silver and gold stacker. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching the channel. Subscribe, please like the video, and also hit the notification bell. Keep stacking. Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely nailed it there, Nick. Now, before you go, I would love for people to connect with you, but I want you to give your, I guess, last piece of advice for everyone. Like, what is your last piece of advice for either gold stackers, silver stackers, or just investors here watching this channel? What would be your advice to them right now in this times of uncertainty?
If you're a stacker, I would say continue doing what you're doing. Think of yourself like a bank. The only preservation tactic is to ensure you operate in your own pursuit and sovereignty. And I think people fundamentally acting like their own central bank is key because it provides you with liquidity and a foundation to build your wealth off. And if you're an investor in the markets, be careful to the downside. You're seeing the volatility in the Nasdaq and Bitcoin. So clearly, the overall markets are very shaky. Very hard to see upside position. Just recently, I saw a chart from the Bank of America on the fund manager survey, which showed that cash reserves are at lowest since almost the early 2000s. So there's not a lot of liquidity in the markets, which is also why you're seeing this kind of sideways movement or lack of productivity, stagflation, and China is seeing deflationary forces. So definitely you want to hedge yourself. You want to remain liquid. Don't be all into the markets, and just keep believing in building your foundation, which is stacking and liquidity reserves.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Nick, I'd love for people, to connect with you. Share right now, what are your socials? Where could people connect with you?
So you could find me on Instagram at Nic Tartaglia. You can also find me on Twitter on Imperium_mind. And then you can also find me guys on Substack. I write the Global Macro Insights report that you can read.
Awesome. You know what, Nick? It's such a huge pleasure having you come down. This is your first time coming down. And
So,
as the market develops, I'd absolutely love to have you come back because
it
it's really nice having, you come down. It was a really breath of fresh air.
was a pleasure to be on and finally get to be on. I've been watching you since the beginning of COVID.
Oh, no
So
way. Okay, that's
yeah,
awesome.
it's been part of the community for a long time. So it's been a pleasure to be on and it's full circle. I hope I can give as much to the community as is given to me.
Awesome. That's really kind words, Nick. I really love that. But yeah, everyone watching, please hit the like and subscribe button. Please go follow Nick on his socials. And everyone watching, thank you so much. And Nick, thank you so much for coming down. Love to have you back on soon.
Awesome. Was a pleasure at any time.
Take care.